تعالى في كتابه الكريم إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا الذين يقيمون الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وهم راكعون. صلوات عليك. We've gathered tonight in memory of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wa salam. In last night's majlis, I started to talk about the 25 years of silence. When we divide Ali's life into 4 parts, from birth to Hijrat, from Hijrat to the Wafat of the Prophet, and then 25 years of the time of the 3 Khulafa, and the last 5 years of his own Khilafat. And that 25 years is sometimes described as the years of silence. And I explained that, of course, it was silence, but in a very meaningful way, in a very powerful manner. Ali was not silent. Whenever he got the opportunity, he talked about his right. But the question comes up, what did he do during those 24 to 25 years? We talked about the issue of, compiling of the Quran, which was a very brief work for Ali during the early days after the wafat of the Prophet. And then, of course, teaching his own companions, the small group that he had, and also assisting the Khulafa in religious and judiciary matters. And we talked about the reason for that, why did he do that. But the main point that I wanted to discuss, and that was the theme last night, and I'll continue, inshallah, till tomorrow or Friday. And that is the 25 years of his era of silence. One of the important things that he did, that we don't really talk about it that much, is that he worked. He worked very hard for his family as well as for charity for the less fortunate members of the community. And this is what I wanted to use this as an example. We talk about the fadail of Ali, and then we say, well, okay, he was, because Allah has blessed him with that, knowledge and position and this and that. But then there are dimensions of their lives which can become role model for us. And especially this is very important for us. Sometimes we hear that charity can only be done by those who are affluent and wealthy people. No. You don't have to become affluent and super rich before you start charity work. You can do it. We looked at the example. They didn't have anything. Rasulullah sent a traveler who said, I'm hungry. Ali and Fatima didn't have anything actually for themselves. The only food they had was for the 2 sons. Yet they sacrificed. So charity doesn't depend on becoming, super rich or wealthy. And this is where we see that, when Amir al-Mu'mineen started this work, basically planting the palm trees in huge numbers, and even making the barren land, suitable for cultivation by digging water wells, he did not just use that for himself. His purpose was primarily the family, no doubt about it. But he did it in such a way that this will be for the family and for Sabilillah. And I would like to use one example from his own will, the most extensive will, not the will actually, endowment deed that he wrote just 3 years before his shahadat. And I would like to go through it tonight, but before I come to that, basically what Ali did was he would, revive this land and plant this palm trees, and then we will make that into waqf. Waqf means endowment. Now, normal endowment would be that, okay, you give it up for this purpose, for the masjid or for the school, and now it's no more, in your control. You're giving it up, and the endowment and waqf means that principal will never be sold. It will be maintained, but the profit of that would be used for the cause that you have given the waqf for. And so that's what is known as sadaqah jariyah. We hear quite a lot from people that, somebody from my family has passed away. Can you tell me, how do we do sadaqah jariyah? Sadaqah jariyah means doing something where the principle will remain, but the proceeds and the profit will continue for generations to come, for the poor and the needy. Jariyah means perpetual, flowing charity. And inshallah, we'll look at that. So basically, waqf, and I don't want to be very technical here, using the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, explains, he says, waqf basically means retain the principle and distribute the fruits. Fruits means the profit. So the principal one will not be touched. And once it becomes a waqf, you cannot, sell it, and it cannot even be inherited by the family. And what Amir al-Mu'mineen did here was something different kind of waqf, where the waqf would be there for two purposes. Number one, it will no more be his property as such, it is becoming waqf. When a property becomes a waqf and an endowment, it cannot be inherited, it cannot be sold, it cannot be gifted. But then he says, I am doing this waqf for my family and for charity. And so what it means is that even the family will not inherit that. And it depends on the waqif, the donor, who is becoming the custodian, and what are the conditions for that. And this is what very similar to during the modern times. Unfortunately, we don't know much about our own faith, our own jurisprudence. The concept of living trust, not living will. Living trust is very similar to what Amir al-Mu'mineen had done, where you take your property, make it into a living trust when you are alive. So it's no more your property as such. And then the government will not tax you on that. Even your children cannot inherit that. But you can put a condition that this is a living trust to be used by my children and the descendants, and it goes on. And so that is not inherited and it's not sold. So it's very similar to that concept that we see in this action of Amir al-Mu'mineen during that 24 to 25 years. Salawat pढ़ने पर हो. What I would like to present, and I'll just go fast, it's a long document. Normally this majlis between Zarbat and Shahadat is relatively short, and I try to do the Masaib in English. We'll see how it goes at the end. This is actually best. Nahj al-Balagha has this version, but it's very summarized in a short version, because Nahj al-Balagha was not a book of hadith. Sayyid Razi was interested in the eloquence and clarity of the language used by Ali. So whatever paragraph or areas which were very, highlighting to him, he would select those. But in Usul Kafi, Sheikh Kulaini has this in entire, version of it, which actually comes from Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salatu wassalam. When one of his companions, Abdul Rahman bin al-Hajjaj, is the one who says that the Imam sent me the text of this living trust, if I may use the term, of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And right in the beginning, he begins by, this is important to understand what was the intention and purpose. Where he says, هذا ما أوصى به وقضى به في ماله عبد الله علي ابتغاء وجه الله. In the name of Allah, the kind and merciful, this is the statement and instructions regarding the properties of the servant of Allah, Ali, done to seek the pleasure of Allah, so that He may admit me in paradise and keep me away from the fire and keep the fire away from me on the day of judgment, when some faces will be honored and other faces will be disgraced. And so this is not a wasiyat or will that you are writing for inheritance. And then he describes, so when you write such kind of a document, you have to specify the property itself. And here we see the hard work of Ali. If you want to see in one place the list of the properties that he had, he says the property that I have, number one in Yambu. We talked about it last night. And its surrounding area. This is mine and it is a waqf. And the slaves who worked for me, other than Rabah and Abu Naydhar and Jubair, other than these three individuals, they are free. None should have any right on them. They are free with the condition that they would work in these properties for 5 years in exchange for their freedom, and their expenses and that of their families will come from the revenues of these properties. The palm trees that he had, planted there. And then he says, moreover, the property I have, this is the second item, in Wadi al-Qura, and the slaves who work there also. This is also waqf entirely for the children of Fatima. Now remember, he's singling out the children of Fatima. MashaAllah, Allah had given him about 25 to 26 children, but this waqf especially for the children of Fatima. And then he says, what I have in Daima, that is also a waqf, another property. And then what I have in Udayna, that is also a waqf, the fourth one. And in this document, the fifth one is the property that I have in Faqirain. And this is all waqf fi sabilillah. And then he explains, إن الذي كتبت من أموال هذه صدقة واجبة بطلة. What I have written here are the properties of mine which are confirmed and certainly waqf, no doubt about it. حيًّا أنا أو ميتًا. It is waqf and endowment, whether I'm alive or I am dead. Means even when I'm alive, I cannot anymore, sell it, because I'm no more the owner of it. When it becomes waqf, it is even the person gives up the ownership. And why did I do this? ينفق في كل نفقة, to be for all causes, seeking by them the pleasure of Allah, fi sabilillah, and for my relatives from Banu Hashim and Bani al-Muttalib, whether they are close in relationship or they are remote in the relationship. So in endowment, you first of all say, these are the properties. Then you have to explain who will be the custodian. It could be yourself or anyone that you appoint to take care of it. And this is where he talks about the custodian and the authority of what they can do, what they cannot do. He says, Hassan bin Ali will be the custodian of these endowments. even when Ali was alive. He would be the one who will manage it with the right to utilize what is appropriate from it for himself and utilize the rest of it in what he deems to be permissible in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is for the family as well as for sabilillah according to his understanding and discretion. And then he says, if he intends to sell from the proceeds of the property to fulfill his own debt, then he may do so if he wants. He's giving him that permission. And there is no restraint upon him in this matter. And if he wants, he can add to its value. He can use the proceeds again to even increase the wealth in the property which is there. There is one place where he says, don't hastily sell the new plants when they're coming up. Wait till they mature and plant them again so that when people look at it, they only see palm trees. They can't even see the ground. So he wanted it to be more dense in that way. Salawat padhne ek baar aur. So he made Imam Hassan the custodian, but then he says that Hassan is also the guardian of all children of Ali and the slaves of Ali, and his property also would be maintained by Hassan bin Ali. And then he talks about the issue that, if he doesn't want to use that property, there were even some houses in those, like in Yambu. It was, if we might use, this summer vacation where he would go. And this we see even during the time of Uthman. Whenever the Muslims turned against Uthman because of his unjust policies, and there was protest in the streets of Medina, Uthman would always blame Ali alayhi salam, although Ali had nothing to do with it. And there was one time he actually asked through Abdullah ibn Abbas, asked him to leave the town and go and spend his time in his property in Yambu. So he had a house there, where he could go and live, and he spent some time there. He talks about it in that context. And so he says, if Hassan doesn't want to live in any of those properties, and if he wants to sell his own personal house, of course he can do that, and he can even use that to benefit from the proceeds of this. But then he says, it could be that there might be a property where it is worthwhile selling it off. So he gives that discretion to Imam Hassan. He says, but remember, if you sell it, then the proceeds will come from that. You have to divide them into 3 parts. 1/3 will go for charity, 1/3 will go for Banu Hashim, and 1/3 will go for the descendants of Abu Talib. So he's assigning the shares. If a property has to be sold, this is how you will, handle the proceeds of that. Then he also further says, if something happens to Hassan and Hussein is still alive, then the custodianship of all these endowments that I have will go to Hussein. And all the authority that I have given and written for Hassan will go to Hussein, and all the restrictions I have put there also will apply to Hussein now. And then he explains something which is very important for us from the Shi'i point of view. He says, I have so many children. Why do I single out Hassan and Hussein? And this is where he says, وَعِنَّ لِبَنِي ابن فاطمة من صدقة علي مثل الذي لبني علي. He is differentiating between Hassan and Hussein. He says they are sons of Fatima. And all other sons, he says they are sons of Ali. There was a reason behind it. And here he says, I've singled them out, given them preference, although all are equal in my views. They are all my children. إِنَّمَا جَعَلْتُ الَّذِي جَعَلْتُ لِإِبْنِ فَاطِمَةَ. I have given this position to the sons of Fatima, ابتغاء وجه الله عز وجل, in order to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Hassan and Hussein are from Fatima. And Fatima is the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he says, one reason is that I want to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then second, وَتَكْرِيمَ حُرْمَةَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, and to honor the sanctity of Rasulullah, the relationship which is there between me and him as father-in-law and son-in-law. And this is also an indication here. I'll come to that later on. And then he says, what if something happens to Hussein? So when you write this kind of a document, you have to actually look at further in future. Hassan is there as a custodian. If something happens to him, it goes to Hussein. If something happens to Hussein, then what? And so this is here, then he has a formula that he's guiding them. He says then the last one among the two, whoever survives the other from the brothers, then they should look at the other sons of Ali. Because now the sons of Fatima are gone. He should look for other sons of Ali. If he finds suitable in his guidance and faith and his trustworthiness, then he should appoint him for custodianship if he wants. Remember, Hassan and Hussein are masoom. Others are not masoom. And so Imam Hassan is saying, look at these qualities. Once you see Iman, once you see Hidayat, once you see Amanat, this is where basically you can appoint them. But if you don't find anyone suitable from the sons of Ali in that generation, your own generation, then he should look among the descendants of Abu Talib. Now he's extending this circle. First was only his own immediate family. Now he's saying, extend your circle. Look at the descendants of Abu Talib and see who is appropriate in your views. But if you realize that most of the elders from the family of Abu Talib have all passed away, then you should look for a suitable person from Banu Hashim. So that circle is even being extended even further. So you have Ali, then you have Ali Abu Talib, and then you're talking about Banu Hashim in general. If Amirul Mu'mineen is so careful about who is going to manage my worldly property, and he is making sure it goes to the closest one, what about Rasulullah leaving the whole ummah to others? This is where you see. It can't be that, he will leave the ummah, at the whim of the people to decide on their own. Where is the first Khalifa in these last days? Decided to appoint Umar. He says, for the sake of the ummah, I did that. And so he had this sense of writing a will about who will be the successor, but Rasulullah was not concerned about the ummah. And this is where we see the issue of, when you talk about just a property or a community, these issues, and especially the relationship with Rasulullah, is very important. Salawat padhne ek baar aur. And then he comes to the main condition about the endowments that he is living. He says, إِنَّهُ يُشْتَرَطْ عَلَى الَّذِي يَجْعَلُهُ إِلَيْهِ أَنْ يُتْرَكَ الْمَالَ عَلَى أُصُولِهِ وَيُنْفِقُ ثَمَرَهُ. He says the person who is given this task, because he's talking to Hassan and Hussein directly, but he says even if later on people will take that position, he says the condition is that he should leave the actual property, the principal, standing on its foundation, and only use its revenue for the causes that I have ordered, as such for the seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for the relatives from Banu Hashim and Banu al-Muttalib, whether they are remote or close. And then he emphasizes it. لا يباع منه شيء ولا يوهب ولا يورث. Nothing from the principle is to be sold or gifted or inherited. And this is where we see that these properties actually, continued. I'm just bypassing a couple of paragraphs there. They were more in details. But at the end then he says, this is the instruction. هذا ما قضى به علي في ماله. This is the instruction that Ali gave regarding his properties in the day after arriving in Maskin near Kufa. Now he's actually coming back from Siffin to Kufa. And he stopped. He and his army stopped there. And this is where he wrote it down. And he says very clearly, and it was witnessed by Shimr bin Abraha, Sa'sa bin Sawhan, Yazid bin Qais, and Hayyaj bin Abi Hayyaj. So there were 4 people who actually were witnesses to this instruction, the endowment deed that Amir al-Mu'minin wrote. And then he says very clearly, وَكَتَبَ عَلِيِّ ibn Abi Talib بِيَدِهِ. And Ali ibn Abi Talib wrote this by his own handwriting. And then the date is there, 10th of Jamadi al-Ula in the year 37 of the Hijrah, which is just about 3 years and a few months before his shahadat in Kufa. Salawat padhne ek baar aur. And so I just wanted to share with you this, just to have an perspective about the seerah of Amir al-Mu'mineen and how he conducted his own family affairs in that way. We don't hear about it that much. And it also answers other questions sometimes we hear. People have these questions, but they're out of respect, wouldn't dare ask it. Sometimes they do that. They say, oh Maulana, how did Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, what was their source of living? Because we don't hear about it. Can you talk about it? What did they do? How did they live their life? When you look at this hard work of Ali, this is the awqaf, endowments of Ali. It survived till the early years of Banu Abbas. We're talking about the days of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. It continued, especially when we look at it when the generations down, not necessarily our imams, sometimes there were dispute, who will be the custodian? And whenever there was dispute, it would be part of history. They will say, oh, this descendant from Ali's line and this descendant from Ali's, they went to the judge to resolve this problem of who will be the custodian. Or sometimes some of the properties were forcefully taken by those who were close to the government. And they would go and complain about it. So at least by those incidents, we know that this property existed. Even in Karbala, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, when he was talking with Umar ibn Sa'ad, Umar ibn Sa'ad reached Karbala on the 4th of Muharram. And every day, for some time, a tent would be there where Umar ibn Sa'ad will come and Imam Hussain alayhi salam will sit with him, try to counsel him, advise him against what he wants to do. And whenever he would say, oh, Ibn Ziyad would not leave me alone, he will torture my family, he will destroy my house. And in one of those, guarantees that Imam Hussain alayhi salam gave, he said, I have a property in Medina. I can write it down for you, even now, if you want. Don't worry about your house. Let him destroy, I'll give you a house in Medina. And so, we see that the barakat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, his hard work. And this is only, we are talking about general charity and how he took care of his own family. But how did he live his own life as an individual? Especially when he became the Khalifa. Inshallah, we'll continue that discussion. But only one thing I will say, as I ended last night, that the question was, if Ali was so, powerful and so just in handling the affairs of the Ummah, why did they oppose him? It was only because of his insistence on justice. The Sahaba had become used to these privileges given to them, and they were not going to tolerate that. I mentioned Umar ibn Talha and Zubair. They were the first one to do bay'at. And they were expecting Ali to make them governors of two different, provinces in the Muslim empire at that time. And they even came to him and said, we did bay'at with this expectation. He said, but I didn't promise you. There's no deal. You did bay'at without any conditions. And I don't consider you to be worthy of those positions. And after some days, they came to him and they said, we want your permission. Nurid al-Umrah. We want to go for Umrah. And Ali said, yes, I know. Turidan al-Ghudra. You're going for Ghaddari. You're going there to betray me. And that's how they then conspired with Aisha, and this is where it ended up in the Battle of Jamal. Even Ibn Muljim, according to the worldly point of view, they will say, if you know he's going to kill you, you should have arrested him or killed him. He was standing there in the line of Baytul Mal, this monthly stipend given to people. And Ali says, "Uridu hayatihi wa yuridu qatli." I want his life, and he wants to kill me. One of his companions said that, why don't we just take him then? And he said, what has he done? How can you punish someone before committing the crime? Ali's standard was something else. You can't compare Ali with the people of that time, nor to the people of our time. Look at this south of our border. And you can realize that when we talk about justice, Ali was the embodiment of justice. Somebody, even in his personal life, divided his times for iftar among his own children. He used to go to Zainab, Kulsum, stay with his own family. And that's where we see that This relationship of father to daughters has a very different meaning. You know, when Ibn Muljim struck the head of Imam Ali alayhi salam, you know, it is very normal when we get up from the sajda, we actually move fast. And so you have the head of Ali coming up. And at the same time, Ibn Muljim's sword is coming out, down. And it came and hit right in the front area here. This was the same location that Umar ibn Abd Wud, in the Battle of Khandaq, injured Amir al-Mu'mineen before Ali killed him. But Ali was very brave. He didn't cry actually. The first words he says, Fustu wa Rabbil Kaaba. Oh, the Lord of the Kaaba, I have become successful. Because I didn't want to die on the bed. I wanted my death to be a shahadat. Even when Hassan and Hussein came, you will see that he's not crying actually. He was consoling Hassan and Hussein. Even in the masjid, he was saying, don't worry about it. Your father now is free from all the difficulties and the conspiracies. He is now free from all these things. He's going to a better place. Even when they put him on the blanket and started to move him gradually to the home, he didn't cry. He asked his family, the young people there, to stop, and he says to the companions that, can you stay back? Because I don't want you to hear the voice of Zainab bin Bukr. Because when they will see me in this state, they will start crying loud, weeping. So Ali didn't cry when he was hurt. He didn't cry in the masjid. He didn't cry when he was taken to the house. You know what made him cry? When he went inside the house, and when the children came and they saw and they started crying. This is where Ali started crying with his family and his children. The doctor by the name of Asim was asked to come and check the wound of Ali. And he looked at it, and after examining, he says, Ali, this sword which was dipped in the poison, it actually hit you in such a way that the poison has already reached the brain. There is nothing which can be done. It is better you start your wasiyat and your last will. As Hazrat Hussain at that time, the doctor looked at the family members and said, don't give him anything in form of food other than milk. According to Agha Kafi, a very famous orator in Tehran, in 60s and 70s, he has a narration very interesting. He says that when the news spread in Kufa that the doctor has said Ali cannot take anything other than milk, the small children who were orphans of Kufa, Ali was known as Abul Yatama, the father of the orphans. When these orphan children heard about this, when their mothers would give them the bowl of milk, they would actually come running to the house of Ali, and they will say to Imam Hassan, we would like to present this milk to our father Ali. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. खुदावंद इस खिलवा कबूल फरमा, हमारे गुनाहों को माफ़ फरमा, हमारे तौफ़ीक़ात में इज़ाफ़ा फरमा, खुदावंदा अली की सीरत पर अमल करने की तौफीक इनायत फरमा। खुदावंदा आलम इस्लाम में सुलह और अमन की फ़िज़ा पैदा कर, तकफ़ीरी अफवाज की जितनी सलाहियत है नीस्त नाबूद फरमा। इमाम के ज़ुहूर में ताजिल फरमा। रब्बना तक़ब्बल मिन्ना इन्नका अंतस समीउल अलीम। मातम हुसैन।